Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and tonight we're going to take a look at the long-range pattern. We'll see what has changed over the past 24 hours and take a detailed, in-depth look at what lies ahead for Southeast Virginia. All right, we're going to start off with New Year's Day, and again, I'm pairing up a surface analysis with a 300 millibar, the jet stream level, which pretty much dictates the flow of the cold and the warm air and the track of the storm systems in and out of Southeast Virginia and across the United States as a whole. So starting off on New Year's Day, what we have going on is we're looking dry in Southeast Virginia on New Year's Day. We do have an area of rain from the Gulf Coast states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, on into Tennessee and Kentucky. But that will stay primarily to our west and southwest. So we're looking dry. New Year's Day, we expect the temperatures to start thicknesses to start rising and the temperatures also to start rebounding to more of a mild period. If you look at the jet stream here on the right, we're looking at a long wave trough that is digging deep into the western United States and northern California, and the flow of that jet axis then goes into Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. area to the north of Southeast Virginia. So we will have an Arctic shot of cold air, about a 42-hour period, and that will commence late tomorrow, in the evening on Thursday night into Friday night, and then we'll start seeing moderation of temperatures New Year's Eve day, and even greater moderation in temperatures on New Year's Day. Let's take a look at 2 January now. By 2 January, we expect the rain that was located over the deep south, the Gulf Coast states, to go ahead and move northeastward into Southeast Virginia, and this actually has the potential to be a pretty good soaking rain next week on Monday. Area of low pressure is trying to develop off the Carolina coast at this time, and that's what's responsible for generating the rainfall. Most of the colder Arctic air remains well to the west-northwest over the northern plains states, Montana, into the Pacific Northwest, into Wyoming. Most of the country looks pretty mild as thicknesses rise throughout the country, especially from the Mississippi River eastward. Looking at the 300 millibar analysis, the jet stream level, we got this huge ridge that's orientating itself from a southwest to northeast direction into Alaska and western Canada, and you can see a deep long wave trough again off the western coast of the United States, which has continued to be a common theme thus far for the wintertime period. We do have the main jet axis then moving up and over Ohio, Pennsylvania, and into New England. Notice this height rise, this ridge here. That's the main axis of the ridge is well offshore of the United States over the western Atlantic, but that ridge is trying to raise the heights up from the southeast into Southeast Virginia on the 2nd. So the orientation of the jet is mostly southwest to northeast this time. That ridge is trying to bump some higher heights, raise some higher heights into the area. So we'll have to keep an eye on things as we progress. Now on to the 3rd of January, which would be next Tuesday, we see an area of low pressure has indeed developed. It's a 1,004 millibar low, which is very weak. Most of the rain is now offshore, off the mid-Atlantic coast at that time. We do see an area of lower pressure over the southern Rockies, and there's some snow out west over South Dakota, Nebraska, into Colorado. And this is the Arctic front right here. It's basically positioning itself leading edge of the Arctic air from Minnesota into eastern Nebraska at this time. Still fairly mild across the eastern United States. We do have some freezing precipitation starting to move into the valleys of New York. Now looking at the jet stream, look at the orientation of this upper level ridge, mostly south to north into Alaska. A strong, very intense and deep long wave trough, pretty much from a south to north orientation off the west coast of the United States, with a stronger jet max rotating through the base of the long wave trough. We're looking at winds of up to 160 knots there over the desert southwest. And then we do have more of a southwest flow again in the upper levels at 30,000 feet at the jet stream level above Southeast Virginia and the mid-Atlantic. So again, we're going to expect some fairly mild conditions on the 3rd of January as well, based on the orientation of this jet, as well as the fact that these thickness lines are well to the north. The rain-snow 540 decameter line is all the way up into northern Vermont and New Hampshire on the 3rd. Looking at the 4th, we can see an area of low pressure now over lower Michigan. We see a lot of rain out ahead of this Arctic front, extending from New York State all the way down to Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Rain on the 4th of January, next Wednesday, looks to remain to the west in the morning hours, but it will start drifting this way towards evening next Wednesday. We expect a very mild day overall, and the Arctic air and the lowest thicknesses are now, the leading edge of the Arctic air is over Indiana into central Arkansas into northern Texas. So this is starting to move southeast with time. The orientation of the jet, we still have a nice big ridge, upper level ridge into the Alaska area off the west coast of the United States, and a long wave trough that is diving down the front side of that ridge into Oregon, California, with the jet maximums, the highest wind speeds within the jet axis, now positioned from Kansas into southern Missouri, southern Illinois at this time. Notice how the ridge has been flattened out, the southeast ridge. You notice how the flow is now becoming from, instead of southwest to northeast in the third, it's now becoming more west-southwest to east-northeast. So it's starting to flatten out at this point. The coldest air is going to be at the base of this trough over the northern plain states as well as into the Pacific Northwest at this time. Moving on to the 5th of January, the leading edge of the Arctic air and the Arctic cold front is now knocking on Southeast Virginia's door. It's over central Virginia now, just to our west, into western North Carolina, northern Mississippi, northern Louisiana, and central Texas. The cold air gets all the way down to central Texas. What we expect with this long wave trough, we do have that long wave trough again. This is a very cold pattern for the United States as a whole, with a long wave trough almost accompanying from the west coast all the way to the east coast, coast to coast, wavelength of a trough. So that's pretty impressive. And then we have some rain shower activity, some scattered rain showers still lingering in the vicinity of Southeast Virginia as that front moves closer and closer, and the temperatures will be going down. All right, now 6th of January, that cold Arctic front is now to our southeast, just offshore. We have much colder air spilling in, lower thickness values. There is a weak area of low pressure, 1,019 millibar low over the western Atlantic, that is trying to develop. It's going to have a difficult time doing so. There's really no upper level support to really kick it off. Again, this long wave trough over the entire over the entire United States, and the cold air is going to be filling in to the base of this trough from eastern Oregon all the way over to New England. We have to look at the orientation of this jet axis, and that's going to be key, and I'll go over that in my main points here in a minute. But the jet axis, how it is orientated, is going to be a key to our temperatures over the time period. Will the core of this Arctic air, will it be allowed to come further southeast into Southeast Virginia? That's all going to be dependent on how this ridge over the west sets up, the long wave ridge. If it's further east over the western United States, it's going to set that trough up much deeper, further to the east, and most likely will be much colder. So we have to keep an eye on things and how things set up. Now, this was really interesting, I thought, from the latest model guidance. We could be looking at our first winter storm of the season. Spot on weather, we're feeling like it's going to happen between the 5th and the 15th of January. We do have some cold air in place. These oranges, these yellows at 5,000 feet, these purple shaded areas, this is all coming south, all going to pour over the entire United States. So it's looking very cold. The cold temperatures are going to be there in place. And then if we get a low pressure system to develop along the leading edge of the coldest air, along that temperature, the greatest temperature contrast, guess what? And if it moves up northeast, if it moves along that boundary between the Arctic air and the milder air to the southeast, we could get an area of low pressure to develop, and the track is going to be interesting to watch. At this time, this is actually on the 9th, the morning of the 9th, Monday the 9th of January. There is snow. It looks like it would start as rain in Hampton Road cities and then possibly go over to snow on the evening of the 8th, the morning of the 9th. But again, it's just way too early to tell at this point in time. So please check back with us at Spot On Weather for the latest. So the long-range final thoughts. The orientation of the long wave pattern will have the greatest impact on our temperatures. For example, where is the trough ridge position set up? How deep is amplification of this jet stream overall? That's really going to be the key to our weather here in Southeast Virginia over the next 5 to 10 days. Now, does this jet axis, does it make a more of a northeast or a northwest to southeast flow from Canada more directly? That's a cold pattern. Does it go more zonal, which will give us average temperatures from west to east, a zonal pattern from the jet? Or if it goes southwest to northeast, guess what? We're probably going to be milder, even more mild than what we're thinking. So we just have to watch the orientation of this. Where are these long wave troughs set up? Where is that long wave ridge early in the period? This one here, where does that set up? All right, so that's key point number 1 in the long range. Number 2, we're expecting a mild period from 2 to 4 January out ahead of that next shot of Arctic air. Arctic cold frontal passage we expect late on the 5th of January, and it's going to usher in colder air again. It's not going to, we looked at the guidance today, and it's not indicating as cold as temperatures as yesterday, but it's still going to be cold, and cold enough for wintry precip if it falls. The bulk of the coldest air will remain over the Midwest and to our north, but that's subject to change. And again, that has to do more with the orientation of the long wave pattern and how that jet stream sets up over time. So keep tuned here to Spot On Weather, and we'll provide you the latest updates. We're watching for the possibility of our first winter storm of the season across the Mid-Atlantic sometime between 5 and 15 January. Cold air will be in place already, plus if we get any precipitation, it could yield our first wintry precip event. So again, it's all a matter of the track. We do have cold air coming down from the northwest. It is going to gradually seep southeastward into Southeast Virginia. We can see all the cold air. It's up here in Canada, and it's continuing to reload. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that for the possibility of our first winter storm somewhere between the 5th and the 15th of January. And the core of very cold air, it remains over Canada. It's right up here, folks. And so we have a lot of cold air on our side, in our northern hemisphere. So it's just a matter of time before all that cold air, that core of cold air, will pour southeast all the way to the east coast. We're waiting for the right amplification and the orientation of the polar front jet stream for that cold air to make its move. Right now we just don't have the favorable conditions to bring the core, and I mean the core, I mean like the very coldest temperatures to be brought down from Canada into Southeast Virginia. Again, the amplification of the jet, the way this jet is set up, west-southwest to east-northeast, it's not a northwest to southeast connection from Canada where we would get the core of the cold air to come down. We need more favorable, just more favorable amplification, the right amplification and positioning of that long wave trough and the long wave ridge upstream. All right, that wraps up the long range tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed this presentation. We'll keep things going and keep you up to date on things here at Spot On Weather. Just a thought, we got one more mild day tomorrow here across Southeast Virginia on Thursday. By tomorrow afternoon, the Arctic cold front comes through. The winds will pick up from the west and west-northwest. Much colder Friday. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day look dry. So that's the good news for everybody to get out there and enjoy bringing in 2017. It'll be dry. And that's all I've got for now, folks. We'll keep an eye on things. Remember, we're Spot On Weather. If we're not spot on, we're not doing it right. Have a great evening, everyone.